So our next panel is incredibly topical. So I'm going to play a little game with you all. I'm going to say software, and you're going to say bomb. Software! Software! All right, this is the What's New in the World of SBOMs panel. We have some amazing folks. We have Tracy Ragan, who gave a great keynote. We have Adolfo, who is an engineer that works in a lot of our projects. We have Gopi, we have Karen, we have Guy, and I believe Mr. Bressers. I will hand this over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we got everybody? Hello. Okay, so while they're filing in, I'll explain what we're going to do. This is a panel, okay? These are people who know a lot about SBOMs, and they're helping build the future and the present of them. Now, I'm happy to ask them questions for the next half hour as a captive audience. However, this is a panel, and I would love it if you all would ask a question. So what I'd like you to do is just shout it out, and I'll repeat it for the folks online and who can't hear, because trying to find a microphone and all that jazz, that's a pain in the butt. So shout out your questions you've got, you know, raise your hand maybe if there's a lot of them or something, and we'll kind of go from there. But like this is your opportunity to ask amazing people questions. So let's just kind of start out with intros. We'll make them quick because I know we don't have a lot of time. So we'll just start with Tracy on the end and work our way down and go from there. Take it away.
Tracy Ragan, CEO of DeployHub and community organizer for Ortelius, a CDF incubating project.
I'm Adolfo Garcia. I'm an open source engineer at Chainguard, and I also SPDX contributor and maintainer of open source tools.
I'm Karen Bennett. I'm at IEEE and ISO, so basically with building out standards around cybersecurity and AI in particular. But I am at heart an open source developer, kernels, and toolchain.
Hi, I'm Gopi Rajbahadur. I work for Center for Software Excellence, Huawei Canada. I look into AI engineering research, and I'm happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Chernobrov, and I am the VP R&D of Scribe Security, an Israeli startup that builds a unique platform for software supply chain assurance.
Fantastic. All right, so I do have one question I'm going to start with while you all think of yours. And I'll start with Guy at the end, because I can. So SBOMs are in the news all the time, right? Everyone talks about, we need an SBOM, right? We all know we need SBOMs, but like, what do we do with these things? What do we actually do with an SBOM?
Wow, thank you. Excellent question. Well, first of all, you need to look into what's inside your SBOMs. SBOMs could be many things, and people often think about SBOMs as just a list of packages, but they could contain so much more. They could contain a variety of different types of components. They could contain information about your images, about the layers of the images, or maybe document your Git commit history or things of this sort. Okay, and once you have good enough set of SBOMs, you can do things with them. So you, first of all, you need to be able to produce them automatically and simply and cover continuously all phases of your software build pipeline to be able to gain complete coverage of that. And you should also be able to produce them repetitively in a timely manner. So let's say you can document with SBOMs consecutive runs of the same pipeline. So you have like a time series of SBOMs. Once you have all these SBOMs in place, you can use them to feed them into something like a policy engine and to make decisions based on these SBOMs. You can use them as inputs for your policy evaluation and decide whether or not they represent something which is a good enough build process, or maybe there is something wrong with that. You can make conclusions regarding suspicious things or suspicious events, like, I don't know, some developer touching a code he's not supposed to, or some commit not signed by someone you authorized to sign it, or things of this sort. Or using your time series SBOMs to identify configuration drifts or version changes which are not what you had in mind or what you wanted to. So these are examples of what you can achieve if you have good enough SBOMs.
Fantastic. Does anyone have anything to add? Jump in if you do.
Yeah, actually, the interest from IEEE and ISO is, especially in the AI space, We're trying to address what needs to actually be in place to be compliant to a standard. And so we've latched on to SBOMs. And so standards that are going to start to come out are now going to specifically say you have to fill in X field in an SBOM, or you have to fill in the security vulnerability aspects in an SBOM. So I can see that this is actually huge for AI applications out there. Plus, I'm sure everybody's seen the news, but LLMs are now generating code. And so they need to abide by the same sort of rules that open source developers do.
What's an LLM?
Oh, sorry, large, it's like ChatGPT.
Large language model, right? Cool. All right. Do we have any questions? Yes, sir. Excellent question. So the question is, how do I know if my SBOM is complete?
You don't. The problem with SBOMs, pardon? This is the question that everybody's asking. SBOMs generate an enormous amount of data, And an SBOM is associated, right, to every version that you produce. So how do you know if you have all the data that you need, if your SBOM's got all of the information that it needs? The only way to do it is sit down and interrogate it. Right. And it's got an enormous amount of data to interrogate. So this is why there's a broader conversation going on beyond just generating your SBOM and trying to read this enormous amount of data or grep it or do something like that and consume it and have automation tools that are now consuming it. Consumption is as important as generation because consumption then will expose the missing information in your SBOM. And we can't expect developers to look at those SBOMs and interrogate them. They've got enough to do. This stuff has to be automated and it has to be easy, and honestly, it has to be part of the DevOps pipeline. So you don't unless you sit down and read it, but we need to fix that. So it's a great question.
All right, I know Porco has a lot to say, but I see Gopi's itching for the mic too, so okay. I'll let you go then, Porco.
I agree with Tracy, but the same problem has generated a lot of interest in the academic community too, and they're trying to come up with metrics, like how much of the fields that you can actually trace to the source and stuff like that, and you could use metrics like that, or you could always try to reconstruct your software from the SBOM and see if it's building the same way. Or you can also do things like see if it's from a trusted source, and sometimes by seeing if the SBOM's from a trusted source, you can attach reasonable amounts of trust to it. But that said, it's a very important problem. It's a lot of data, and we need more comprehensive ways of validating it, and it should be part of that pipeline.
Jump in, Adolfo.
All right. So my take on this is twofold. So the first one is you need to understand where in the evolution of SBOM we are. So if you think about the early days of the internet, we used to ship everything unencrypted to the network. Like, yeah, send it, I don't care. You'd be surprised to find out how much of email still travels unencrypted to this day. And I think right now with SBOM, the idea is let's get something out there so that we can start understanding the problems. And this is the first problem that the community of SBOM is questioning. Like, is this complete? Is this a good quality? There are some serious efforts to try to make SBOMs verifiable. There's, I don't know if it's already in OpenSSF, but there's the SBOM, that's the name, project, trying to understand how to make the SBOM verifiable. But nevertheless, I think there's some very good criteria that you can apply to your SBOM. When you think about quality, a number of factors are taken into account to really understand if your SBOM is of good quality or not. And it's a multi-dimensional thing, but it has to do with the type of software that you're trying to model. So if you're thinking about a binary, you can expect some information to be there, and you may be able to see, okay, this looks more or less complete, or am I missing large swaths of information that should be in here? If I'm looking at the container image, Am I including all of the operating system dependencies, all of the language dependencies? Are they there? Does it have a good structure? So there are a number of equality issues that you can check in the SBOM before just do not treat it as a completely black box. There are good quality measures that you can use to assess the SBOM today.
Fantastic.
Just to add to the last point here.
All right, quickly. We've got lots of questions.
Okay, so you can do like simple sanity checks to an SBOM you produce. If you know you use a certain base layer and you use a certain set of developers tools, you have some idea of what it's supposed to look like. So it's not a complete validation of the SBOM, but still as someone who knows your own pipeline and your own developers tools, you know what you should expect. And maybe you can do a brief sanity check as a best effort for it,
Nice.
at least.
All right, you said you have a question, Chris?
Sumasphere wants to know, is it possible to rebuild a package in an air-gapped build system based off of an SBOM?
All right, so the question, I'll do my best to repeat that. The online folks have asked if it's possible to rebuild a package in an air-gapped build system based on the SBOM. Is anyone brave enough to answer that?
I could try. I think that depends on what level of SBOMs have been generated, right? There's multiple levels of SBOMs. There is runtime, there's compiler, there's source code, there's packages. So potentially yes, if we were generating a complete set, and that is the kind of the point is to have all of the information to be able to reproduce something. But not everybody generates all levels of SBOMs, and we're definitely not there yet.
Yeah.
So my answer would be yes and no. So the yes is you should absolutely reproduce the same. In a reproducible build, the ingredient should come from whatever is outlined in the SBOM. But in the strict SBOM sense, like the bill of materials, it will not necessarily have the instructions to rebuild. So that part is missing. That is more of a provenance kind of thing. So the formats are like evolving to incorporate that data, but the strict sense of SBOM is missing that part.
Yeah. So I would also agree. It's probably yes or no. I mean, right now, with 3.0, I'm fairly new to SPDX, but what I can see is there's now a build profile with the intent that that's where we're headed. But in my area of AI, a model card gives you all the instructions to be able to reproduce your software. And right now in the SBOM, we're doing a link out, an external reference to a model card. So yes, if a developer or somehow it's all the information's there, you can rebuild.
Fantastic. All right, question way in the back I just saw. Yes.
Quick question. So today we're generating SBOMs at a component level for many of our customers, and we see a growing need for having it in application level. So you think of 50 different microservices that you're generating an SBOM for. You want to roll that up. You've got challenges across different formats. The teams are generating these in. I guess what we'd love to hear your thoughts on the importance of that. Is it necessary to have that? Valuable to have that application view.
Sure. All right, I will summarize the question as today our SBOMs focus heavily on the component level. Why are you holding up two hands for me? 10 minutes. Oh, okay. I gotcha. Okay, thank you. So today we focus heavily on the component level, but what about kind of taking the components and rolling that up into the application level, right? Because there's multiple levels. Gopi, I'll give you the first go at this one if you want.
I think it's useful to abstract it up. And with the recent 3.0 update coming out in SPDX, at least that's the one standard I'm familiar with, that gives you this useful decomposability with addition of profiles. So I think it'd be useful to not just have it all in one flat structure, but actually represent the SBOM to have the similar hierarchies as your software. It becomes particularly useful when you start integrating a lot of AI systems and data systems as part of your software, because they now have like a whole other set of complexities associated with it.
Learn about Ortelius. Ortelius is doing exactly what you just described. So Ortelius takes SBOMs for a component, and it allows you to create a logical application package. It's called a base version of the package. Anytime a dependent component gets updated or a package gets updated, we create a new version of the logical application and consolidate the SBOM for you. So Ortelius is an open source project at the CDF.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to keep going. Questions? I saw you first, sir. Oh my goodness. I don't know if I want to ask that question. All right. I'm not going to ask that because I don't want to get anyone in trouble. So I appreciate the question was for those on the internet. Do we think there will be a conversion into a single SBOM standard? And I'm going to not answer. I'm not going to ask that question. I will answer that as the moderator to avoid putting them on the spot. The answer is time will tell. That is the best non-answer to that question we can possibly give. All right, next question. You right there. Yeah, I can hear you good enough.
So with SBOMs, I think, because when I'm thinking about this across the board, it's an excellent idea. I am with you on creating the ingredients list. I know for a fact, right, because there's a spectrum of things that you build and then distribute, particularly to Fed, which is why we're really pushing on this right now. Now, in sort of the center of it, you've got cloud services, and that's what this is tailored really well towards. The other side of it, you have complexity with Gopi is doing. And that requires a lot of really extra attention. What I'm concerned about is that it's been blanketed, and now we have conditions where you're looking at like a major consumable sector is embedded. And now when the rigorous regulation is coming down, those SBOMs are bigger files than some of the executions of those. It doesn't make sense. So I think there needs to be more nuance to the way that we're approaching these core devices. I think, yeah, we can have a like let's be in, but sometimes it just doesn't match with common sense.
Okay, I'm going to try to summarize that. So I guess the fundamental question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's a very black and white view today of SBOM of just you must do it. Whereas there can be nuance once we start breaking this apart, and we can use embedded as an example where the SBOM produced from an embedded universe could actually be bigger than the embedded thing itself. So I guess I will send that to you folks of, do you think it's very black and white today, and how much nuance do you think we should have in this discussion?
I'll take a first stab at it. So with the recent, once again, because I've been working with 3.0, that's the standard I'm familiar with. With the recent standard coming out, there is, for each profile, there is a required field and there's an optional field. And as we build this standard, as we did this time, it's important to have those conversations to find out what is the absolute minimum that is required, not all the nice to haves. Represent all the nice to haves, but make sure you have absolute minimum. And I understand that as the systems grow, it is unavoidable that even with just the minimums, it's going to be so much. But it's more along the lines of you better have it so that you can have traceability when needed. It's there, you can search it, rather than not have it and go find a needle in the haystack.
Please.
Well, my view is, so the size in relative data of the SBOM does not necessarily have to do with the artifact that is describing. So you don't necessarily need to embed the SBOM inside of the embedded. Discoverability is like a whole other story of the SBOM. But the SBOM is part of a wider, like it's just one piece of information of the whole supply chain. You have provenance, you have signatures, you have all of this wonderful data that is flowing constantly and being generated, not only as the artifacts are created, but also when they are used, deployed, so on. So I think the more information we have is better. This information is meant for machines, so machines thrive when there's more data. So the more we can add, the better. It doesn't matter if your artifact is tiny. Kang and Gopi are doing SBOMs for data sets, like big, large data sets. So in comparison there, the SBOM is tiny. But it's about having a well-informed and described supply chain.
Just to add to that, I mean, I come from an AI world, and I can see SBOMs, whether it's mandatory, optional, as much data as you throw at it. I was at the Tools Summit yesterday. I would encourage that we start to think of AI-powered tools, so we're automatically either generating the SBOMs or taking the data from the SBOMs to do other things that are relevant to figuring out the cybersecurity issues.
All right. Questions? All right, very back.
So I love the idea of SBOMs, but I don't like the idea of writing them. So are there any tools that are available that developers can take advantage of, especially to preempt questions such as quality and trust?
That's a great question. So the question was, well, like, what is the tooling developers can use? Because obviously you're not making these by hand. And we'll start, Guy, I'll give this one to you on the end there.
Okay, so I'm not going to promote our own tools, obviously, but there is a broad variety of SBOM generating tools. You can find many of them are open source, and many of them are very good quality SBOMs, as mentioned earlier. And you don't need to make them up yourself. There is a broad selection you can choose from. Of course, ours is the best, but...
Please.
All right, so an important thing to keep in mind. Right now, we are kind of like the adventurous developers are trying to generate the SBOMs for themselves. But in the future, what we want to see is automatic SBOM generation everywhere. SBOM everywhere, right? So
that's right.
The idea here is your tool should be generating those SBOMs, should be aggregating those SBOMs, and should be deploying them, and they should be invisible. The developer needs to be informed, but it should only become aware of their SBOM when something fails. The same way your internet connection is there and you only notice when it fails, the same thing should be with an SBOM. Like you're publishing something, hey, there's something missing. This SBOM is kind of low quality. That's when you really, when you need awareness. This is not here today, but this is where we're trying to get things moving towards.
Indeed. All right, we got probably time for one more, let's say, and I just saw a hand way over there. All right, I love this question. So it's basically, if we look at, we'll pick on automobiles with airbags. You have the ability to issue a recall, and they can issue a recall for something very old. And when we think of SBOMs today, we're often thinking about modern and new and generating them like at build time. But what about the legacy hardware and the legacy software all of us are running in our infrastructure? So I'll just kick that one out to the Tracy. You look pretty excited about this one.
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And there's many aspects to the answer, but I'm going to focus on this one. So right now, most organizations don't have SBOM data aggregated at a federal level. So it makes it very difficult to do anything if you know that one of the many libraries that may be used gets a CVE for that one particular package, right? This package has a CVE and we know one team is using it. That one team goes out to fix it. What we need to be able to do is say this CVE exists for this package. Now let's go make sure that we notify everybody in the organization based on that federated data that there is a CVE that they should address. Because right now every team has to go discover that CVE. And a CVE doesn't tell you what the packages, all the packages are, so you have to have the SBOM to be able to reflect, okay, we have this CVE now in 4 or 5 of our applications. So that's the data that we need to be able to use in order to do that notification, and it comes directly from the SBOMs.
Anything else? All right. All right, I've got one last question from me. And it's kind of the close of this, is so we're all very plugged into SBOMs in this group. What are you most excited about for, let's say, the next year of what you see on the horizon of SBOM? And I'll start down at the end with Guy, and we'll work our way back this way.
Well, I think the adoption of standards and interoperability, as was mentioned earlier, let's say many package managers will adopt things like salsa provenance objects or things of this sort. It will make our lives much easier of producing high-quality SBOMs and being able to verify them.
Gopi?
I have two parts to this, two-part answer to this question. One is I'm really excited about seeing how people are going to use SBOMs to represent AI software over the next year. We just put it out there and really looking forward to how it gets used in the real world. And the second part is I start to see conversations about how SBOMs are going to look like for software that is generated by an intelligent agent. And there's a lot of complexities and a lot of layers there. I'm really excited to see how that space is going to evolve. Thanks.
Yeah, so as was mentioned, I mean, I'm coming from the standards area. I'm very excited to see that SBOMs can help us adhere to standards, and for auditors, because the auditors are coming for some of this software. It's a cool tool.
Is that a warning or a threat?
No, the IEEE is training masses of people to be third-party auditors, especially for AI applications. But I also see a future. So again, I come from the AI area. Cybersecurity is only one sort of vulnerability out there. There's ethics. And I can see SBOMs can also be expanded to that.
Awesome. Adolfo?
To me, the most exciting part is that I see a shift in mindset. So when SBOMs finally happen, it's going to be because we're going to have this tide of people realizing where they fit in the SBOM picture. And you start seeing this if you hang around the SBOM forums and all of those, the SBOM user groups, you'll notice that people are starting to ask the right questions, is my SBOM good quality? Folks that are, the scanners are starting to understand how do I should treat this SBOM? Developers are starting to question where they fit. And I feel this year we're going to see those positions being solidified so that everybody can start working.
Awesome. And Tracy, take it home.
I am looking forward to continuing the conversation about the consumption of the data. If you think about DevOps pipelines and the future of what that's going to look like, SBOM should be a really key part of it, because the SBOM is associated to a deployed object, and deployed objects can be in many different locations, so you could have the same version. You have different versions of the same component with different SBOMs. When we start gathering that information, as well as the DevOps information, then we can start building more intelligent DevOps pipelines that include security that we can actually do something with. We can create zero policies. We can create policies, period. We can create self-healing. So there's so much that can be done with this data. Consumption is what I'm looking for.
Fantastic. I want to thank you all for the questions. They were lovely. Thank you, panelists. This was an awesome panel. Thank you.